Hello children, welcome to the next session of the chapter Resources and Development. Now today we shall discuss about development of resources and resource planning. In the previous session we have discussed about what are the resources, what are the criteria needed for becoming a thing, a resource, and so many other aspects. Today we shall discuss that how the resources should be developed and what do you mean by resource planning and what are the stages involved in resource planning and why it is necessary in India. Now let us come to the development of resources. Now see, what happens, we assume resources as a free gift of nature. The problem is that whenever we assume anything as a free gift of nature, we start using it indiscriminately. Indiscriminately means without thinking about its pros and cons, whether it is going to benefit us or whether it is going to benefit our future generation as well. So as a free or as an indiscriminate use of resources, many problems arises in our society. First, let us concentrate about the problems arises due to the indiscriminate use of resources. There are three types of problems that arises due to indiscriminate use of resources. First one is the depletion of resources. As we are utilizing the resources without thinking of the pros and cons, the resources are being depleted day by day. I mean to say that a time will come when there will be no resource for our use. We have already discussed that many resources are there which are non-renewable in nature, like fossil fuels, minerals, oils, and so many other things. But we human beings are just using it indiscriminately. This raises a serious question, that is the depletion of the resources. In the future, a time will come then when there will be no resource. Then second problem arises due to indiscriminate use of resource is the accumulation of resources in few hands. We all, most of us has developed a tendency to accumulate, to collect more and more resources for our use. What happens as a result? Two sections are created in the society. One is having all the things and one is having nothing. That means two sections are created due to indiscriminate use of resources, rich and poor. That gap is increasing day by day, the gap between the rich and the poor. The rich are getting richer by accumulating more and more resources and the poorer are getting poorer. So this is the second problem arises due to the indiscriminate use of resource, that is accumulation of resources in few hands, which results in creating two sections in the society, rich and the poor section. And the third one, the most important problem due to indiscriminate use of resource is that it gives concern to the ecological crisis. It gives birth to several ecological crises. The ecosystem is disbalancing day by day, creating a threat upon the survival of human beings, like global warming, ozone layer depletion, and so many other things. As a result of indiscriminate use of resources, we are facing these problems, and these are increasing day by day, and unfortunately a time will come when we will have nothing to lose. Our survival, our existence will be in danger. So now, because of these things, there is a need to give a rethinking upon how to utilize the resources. There is no denial of the fact. We have to use the resource. Resource तो use करना ही है हमें. But how? कैसे use करेंगे? हम ऐसे use करेंगे कि resource का हम use भी करें, उनका benefits भी लें और उससे हमें हानि भी नहीं. And then the answer comes in sustainable development. One thing is quite clear कि resources का utilization हम किस लिए करते हैं? अपने development के लिए, अपने विकास के लिए. लेकिन what is the use of that development which pose a threat to our survival? So that's why development must be there, but that should be sustainable development. What is this sustainable development? Sustainable development means it is a development that happens without damaging the environment and without making any compromise to the future generation. Again get it कि वैसा विकास जो हो तो जरूर लेकिन उसमें हम कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं करें. दैट मीन्स बिना प्रकृति को हानि पहुंचाए, बिना नेचर को डिस्टर्ब किए जो हम डेवलपमेंट करते हैं जिससे हमारा फ्यूचर भी सिक्योर रहे, दैट इज कॉल्ड सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट. दैट मीन्स डेवलपमेंट दैट अकर्स without damaging the environment and without making any compromise to the future generation. That is called sustainable development. So we must concentrate that resources should be utilized, but for sustainable development. And because of these things, a lot of people have thoughts about these issues. At the global level there was a concern. लोगों ने सोचा, बड़े बड़े नेताओं ने, बड़ी बड़ी देश के थिंक टैंक्स ने सोचा कि कैसे हम सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के गोल को अचीव करेंगे. और इसके लिए at global level several initiatives were taken in order to achieve the goal of sustainable development. One of such initiative was the Earth Summit, which was held in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. In the city of Rio de Janeiro, the delegates of more than 100 nations of the world came and meet together. They discussed the issues related to the sustainable development. They discussed the issues related to indiscriminate use of resources. And they came to the conclusion, उन्होंने ये सोचा कि हम क्या करें कि sustainable development के गोल को achieve किया जाए. And that summit was called the Earth Summit. और इसी summit में इन सारे डेलीगेट्स ने सोचा कि वी विल प्लान आउट अ थिंग टू अचीव द गोल ऑफ सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट. और इसके लिए एवरी मेंबर नेशन हैज टू प्रिपेयर एजेंडा 21. दैट मीन्स द लिस्ट ऑफ 21 प्रोग्राम्स दैट विल बी applied, that will be implemented by each and every country in order to achieve the goal of sustainable development. So these were the initiatives taken. These are some examples of the initiatives taken for the sustainable development. So we must plan, we must think, we must give a thought. Yes, we have to utilize the resource, but how? In such a way that it will lead not only to the development but to the sustainable development. Now comes to resource planning. See, what do you mean by planning? Planning is something which you do in order to achieve the maximum output from minimum of the resources. And in a country like India, the planning is very much necessary. We also plan a lot. When we get a salary, when we get something, we plan that how we have to spend it. Same thing must be happen in the case of resources. As resources are not the free gift of nature, so we must devise some planning in order to utilize and get maximum of the resources. So that is called resource planning. That means strategy devised for judicious use of resources. Means ऐसी स्ट्रेटेजी जिसको हम बनाते हैं ताकि हम रिसोर्स का जुडिशियस और मैक्सिमम यूटिलाइजेशन कर सके. दैट इज कॉल्ड रिसोर्स प्लानिंग. सो एंड इन ए कंट्री लाइक इंडिया, जहां पर एक और स्टेट्स लाइक झारखंड है, कर्नाटक है, विच आर रिच ऑफ मिनरल रिसोर्सेज, तो वैसे भी स्टेट्स हैं विच आर वेरी स्कार्स इन मिनरल रिसोर्सेज. बट व्हाट वी नीड द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ ऑल. दैट्स व्हाई अ प्लानिंग मस्ट बी देयर. So that's why planning is necessary. So resource planning should be there. Means a strategy must be there for the maximum and judicious utilization of resources. So when we talk about resource planning in India, there are 3 stages of resource planning. Resource planning is done in 3 stages in India. First is identification of resources. We have to find out where the resource is. And for that, mapping, surveying, etc. are done. We have to find out the areas where the resources are there. Then, after finding the resource, we have to evolve a planned structure with technology. Because without technology, resources are of no use. Means we must have a planned structure with appropriate technology to utilize that resource. And the third stage of resource planning is matching the resource development plan with overall national development plan. It means that we must think that whatever we are going to do, how we are going to utilize the resources, that must be in the favor of not only our society, but that must be in the favor of nation as a whole. There is a possibility that one thing might be a development for me and it can be a disaster for me. Suppose the creation of multi-purpose river valley projects. These are the development process for various companies and multinational companies. But for the people living near the dams, near the villages, it is a disaster for them. So matching the resource development plan with overall national development plan is the next stage of resource planning. So in India there are 3 stages of resource planning. Okay? Then identification of resource, evolving a planned structure with appropriate technology, and matching the resource development plan with overall national development plan. And after all these things, now come the conservation of resources. What do you mean by conservation? Conservation is preserving something for future use. We have discussed so many things that resources are being utilized indiscriminately, and that's why there is a threat that they will not be here on this earth in the coming days, and there will be a question upon our survival. That's why conservation of resources is necessary. It was told by Mahatma Gandhi that there is enough for everybody's need, but not for anybody greed. सबके जरूरत के लिए पर्याप्त है, but there is no limitations of the greed. So we must put emphasis upon the conservation of resources as well. And what should we do for conservation of resources? We should plan out sustainable development. We have to utilize the resources in judicious way. We have to do the resource planning, and then we can achieve the goal of conservation of resource and the sustainable development as well. So in these 2 sessions, we have discussed about resources, their classifications, development of resources, resource planning, stages involved in that, and conservation of resources. Now there are few questions which you must practice based upon the study up to here. First is, what do you mean by resource? Then classification of resources on the various bases, classify the different types of resources. Third is, discuss problems associated with indiscriminate use of resources. This is the third question. Fourth one is, explain the term sustainable development. I have already explained it. Why it is necessary. The fifth one is, write down short notes on the Earth Summit of 1992 and Agenda 21. We have discussed these as initiatives to reach the sustainable development. Sixth one is, what do you mean by resource planning? Mention the different stages involved in it. And the seventh one is, why conservation of resource is the need of the hour, and suggest some measures to conserve the resources. So these are the questions based upon the 2 sessions which I have taken on resources and development. In next class, we will discuss something more about resources, and we will bring into this chapter. Till then, goodbye.